Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, May 15th, 2014, and this is TYT Community. We've got a wonderful show for you tonight. We have a smaller panel than normal, although you might not tell it if you're watching the number of people in the Hangout right now. We're going to do something a little different. Jeff has the night off, so I will be driving tonight, so please bear with us. This is my first side on the production side of things, and I can tell you I have a new appreciation for what Jeff does every day. We have, so I know we unveiled a lot of cool new kind of tech stuff last week. Unfortunately, we'll have to step back from some of that because of the temporary hosting situation, but we do have a thing that, I don't know, it's a first for TYT Community, but it's certainly kind of out of the ordinary. We have 2 or 3 panelists tonight, depending on whether or not Ms. Moore chooses to stay with us. But we also have 2 interviews. We have one with Rance Collins about a wonderful HuffPost piece that he wrote. Rance, you want to say hi to us?
Hi.
Excellent. And then we'll have another interview with Ms. Becca Moore, who is on the front lines of the Arkansas gay marriage happenings. I guess is really the only words I can choose to say for it. So, Becca, how you doing?
Good, thanks. And happening's a good word choice.
Excellent. And then, as always, unfortunately, we have Sean Fitzgerald. Sean, don't say anything. So let's go ahead.
By the way, Jordan murdered Jeff. That's why he's not here.
Hey, you know, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I feel like I'm up to it. So we'll start off with Rance Collins. Now, full disclosure, I guess, in the name of journalism here, going forward, I have to disclose that Rance and I are friends and have been for some time. And not only that, but I know his family very well, and I respect the hell out of his family. And so Rance has written just a wonderful, wonderful piece that has gotten. We're kind of behind the times on it, but you know, schedules and whatnot. We were just able to get Rance on the show. But a great piece on Huffington Post by the title of I Was Broken and Matt Bomer Put Me Back Together. And just I don't want to presume to say anything better than Rance could, so I'll kind of let him go from here. But I do just want to throw the disclaimer out here. If you are tuning in to watch an episode of somebody bashing parents for their right or wrong reactions to the situation, that's not what you're going to get here, because Rance's parents are good people. And so hopefully this will be a good kind of change of pace where we'll actually have, as we like to do in TYT Community, an actual conversation and discussion about issues rather than just shouting talking points at one another. So Rance, if you could, just kind of in a nutshell, break down the story for us, let us know kind of what you wrote, kind of what's going on, and then we'll go from there, man.
All right. Well, last year, I actually finally, after a long time, came out to my family. And being from a family in the South, regardless of how wonderful your parents are, it's a very difficult situation because, as a lot of people probably know, Arkansas and Texas are not necessarily the most liberal states. Nor are they located, and they are also located right in the middle of the Bible Belt, as we like to call it. And so there is a little bit of a, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do to come out in that situation. And I currently live in Los Angeles, where it's literally being gay here is whether or not you prefer, whether or not you're a vegan or whether or not you like to eat meat. It's more of that situation. So it's a little bit different situation. And I finally was actually outed to my parents, and then I had to confirm that to them. And it was not an easy situation, and I had a role model, I guess, kind of a quiet role model that I looked up to. This guy named Matt Bomer, who a lot of you may know. He's in a show called White Collar that's on USA, which I will admit I actually did not watch that show until after I met this guy. But I still looked up to him a lot because he was out and he was proud, and he has a husband and a family, and he's just a really great influence for people who are like me in the creative industry to know that you can move forward and accomplish things. And so I had a very chance meeting with him at Warner Brothers because I am a tour guide at WB, and I happened to see him on the lot, and I went up to him, and he was extremely nice. I told him that he had been inspiration to me, and he gave me a hug and asked if I wanted to take a picture, and I took the picture. And then I wrote about meeting him and wrote about how that kind of brought my coming out story full circle. And I submitted it to the Huffington Post, and it ran, and then it got thousands upon thousands of likes. It's great.
Well, that's awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah. So there's kind of the backstory. There's the kind of the gist of the piece he wrote. Definitely recommend checking it out, and we'll throw a link up in the YouTube. Actually, I think we already have if you're watching live. So I wanted to ask a few questions, Rance. First off, and I'm going to be completely honest here. I have to change my line of questioning a little bit because I read the story whenever it first, I don't know, went to press, whatever the phrase is for internet media. And since then, I'd forgotten that you were outed. I thought that this was something that you were able to do on your own. So with that in mind, growing up all those years, obviously this is after college. I've known you for a few years whenever this has happened. Did you have anyone, back home growing up or in college that you were able to confide in? Like, was there a confidant or two, before you were outed? Well, I guess obviously if you were outed, someone knew, but was there somebody that you were able to share this with, or was it something that you pretty much had to completely keep to yourself until after college?
I did not tell a single soul until after college. I didn't. I kind of busied myself with everything else in my life. I just didn't pursue any sort of romantic section of my life because I just couldn't concentrate on that. Because I honestly just didn't think there was a way that I ever could be gay. Because I didn't want to. Cause my parents any pain or disappointment, because I do feel like we live in a very, or there is sort of a judgmental nature in the kind of the religiously based community of the southern United States, and I think that perception really drives a lot of the fears that are in the South, and I think perception was my fear, and I didn't want to bring that upon my family. I didn't want to bring shame upon them. What's that? I know this is such a dumb, broad question, but what's that like? I mean, the day-to-day of constantly, being afraid that if your parents find out who you are, there'll be shame. Kind of how do you? I don't know a better way to phrase it. What's that like? It's like a constant. It's a constant fear that's in the back of your mind, and you busy yourself with all these other things. I was busy being a good student and working on all these creative projects on the side, developing every other segment of my personality. You try to put all these other things in front of you so you don't have to think about that thing that's way in the back. But it's kind of inevitable because it is a part of human nature, and you can't deny yourself basic needs of human nature. And so eventually it's going to come to the forefront, and you have to confront that. But I imagine there's many people like me who are 25 years old as I am, and they're still in denial because of fear. And it's like that little lump in your throat that you get when you're afraid something's going to happen, or the thing you are most afraid of has happened, but it's there constantly.
Gotcha. All right, well, if we can get not that this entire story is an incredibly.
I actually got a quick question for Rance. This actually has little to do with your article, but a lot of people who are, for lack of a better term, gay haters, claim that it's a choice or all these different things. And my question is, for you, like, when did you know personally that you were gay?
Well, the first time I remember having any sort of feelings was when I was 8 years old, and I saw Robin shirtless in a Batman comic book. But I mean, from the first time I had any sort of um, sexual feelings, which was around the age of 11 or 12, it was always centered at men as opposed to women. And I have never had, if I can just be completely graphic, I've never had any desire to see a woman naked.
I mean, that's just what I wanted to get out there, because it's like a lot of people don't understand. It's just a normal like thing. That's like the normal time that a kid starts liking. Oh, that a straight kid would start liking girls. It's not a conscious choice. It's something that you're born with. I have a question, because Bulmer was your personal hero, right?
Yes.
And a lot of kids are going to be looking up to the next like gay icon, who is Michael Sam. He was drafted by the Rams recently.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about that story, and the fact that he's not only a football player, but he's also going to be on his own reality TV show?
I think it is so important to break down that wall, because the NFL, the NBA, you know, that's kind of like the epitome of macho, the epitome of alpha male, and it is in large part that type of perception of those guys being the ultimate of what a man is supposed to be that keeps guys like me kind of down in the gutter in people's opinions. And so to have someone who is this all-American, this nice-looking young now NFL player, come out there and be proud and to kiss his boyfriend the first time he finds out that he's been drafted, and for that to be broadcast across ESPN and all these other alpha male channels is huge, because it breaks down a little wall, and hopefully if there is a 12 or 13-year-old who sees something out there like that, and they're in the same place that I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, then they will know that they aren't alone, and that they aren't the only ones who feel that way, which is what I felt.
Totally.
I do have one follow-up. Do you have any advice for like younger teens who are maybe afraid to come out to their parents, or like anything like you'd like to put out there?
Well, I will say, sometimes the fears, it's tough to say this, but sometimes the fears are legitimate, because you could have a family that is going to react negatively. That is a harsh reality, because even the best people can react very harshly to something that they do not understand. And so I think the most important thing to do is to seek advice from maybe people who you are not connected to, who you don't have to worry about judgment, because there are a number of different organizations out there that is solely to help teenagers through that type of crisis, and be able to provide counseling that will help them know when the time is right, and help them make the transition a little bit easier. You know, the It Gets Better Project and the Trevor Project, and there's several different hotlines that can be called discreetly, and you don't have to worry about anybody's judgment, because I can understand I wouldn't have had any sort of guts to tell even a gay person who I knew when I was 15.
Like I was saying, this whole issue obviously is highly personal, and I'm gonna put you under the spotlight here a little bit more, or under the microscope, I should say, and really just crank up the personal nature here. So if I'm overstepping any bounds or assuming too much, you know, by all means, let me know. But you're a person of faith. was that faith ever a source of comfort through all of this, or was it always like a source of pain?
You know, it's a struggle, and I think everybody who is faithful, is a Christian, goes through moments of doubt, regardless of whether or not they're a homosexual. The thing is, it's just a little bit more strong whenever you're having to take what people view to be the basic cornerstones of a belief and break those down and be able to understand how you fit in within them. And there was definitely all through high school and college, especially going to a university where it's written. I went to a school where it's written in the bylaws of the university that homosexuals are not allowed on campus, or people aren't allowed to be homosexual or something, or practice homosexuality.
Yeah, there's a line about homosexual behavior.
There's a lot about homosexual behavior, and to have that like right here, you kind of have to readjust your entire way of thinking, because on the other shoulder you have this saying that this is how you feel, and you have to reevaluate all of your feelings of right and wrong, because you just have this inbred belief that there's something wrong with you. And so I definitely went through some periods of not going to church at all, of questioning, and there was one point where I felt so guilty right after I started exploring my feelings that I ran back to a very conservative church just so I wouldn't have to deal with it again. And then I realized that that wasn't the way, and I kind of drifted again. But then I found an open and accepting community here in Hollywood, the United Methodist Church, which I will be marching with in the Los Angeles Gay Pride Parade in 2 weeks. And they, or is it 3 weeks? In a number of weeks, I'll be marching with them. and and they are so non-judgmental, and they're so about what I think Christ was about, that you really get a new, fresh perspective of what faith is. And I really hope that a lot of the churches that are so focused on the negative and the black and the white can really take a page from a place like the one that I go to, because I really think that that is what the Christian purpose is supposed to be about. They simply believe in loving one another and helping other people, and there's something really beautiful in that. And once you are able to find that and to see how you fit within that community, then I think faith is possible again. But it was definitely a road. It was definitely a very bumpy road to get to a point where you felt at home in a faith community again.
Excellent, excellent. And that opens the door for a great segue to my next question. And I think this one, I don't know if this will be tougher for you, but this is probably the tougher one for me to ask, because for me, as a straight man, it's really easy, with a background in theology, for me and all my straight buddies to sit around, and smoke cigars and talk theology and talk about, what is or isn't the Christian response to human sexuality and stuff like that. So I mean, it's a lot harder than to bring someone who's obviously having to deal with that every day, for better or worse. As a Christian, and with the perspective you have, as a gay man, do you think there's a way for Christians to hold convictions, that may or may not, at least in some ways, be seen as more traditional, or to hold in some way the homosexual lifestyle, for quote unquote, is for them to not be okay with every single aspect of that, and do that and still come from a place of love and not outright bigotry, or is that immediately a bigoted position? And if there is a way to do it and not come from a place of bigotry, what does that look like?
I think that I think it's definitely a start to be able to say, like, love the sin or not the sin is basically what they say is their argument, which I don't really, I don't personally prescribe to that, obviously.
Right.
But
Been grossly misapplied.
yes, I will say that, it's an evolution to change an attitude of the people, and it's not something that happens overnight, and it's not something that even making gay marriage legal across the entire country can change the course of. Basically, if people can be willing to give that much, then eventually I think that full acceptance within the community will come. And I encourage an approach of love and tolerance, even if you don't understand. I think once the door has been opened or even cracked open, then it's easy to see that people are just people. And once people accept the fact that people are people, then I think that people's theology will be able to see the interpretations that I see, if that makes sense.
Sure. No. I mean,
So I'll
it's
accept
it's a difficult thing to put into words. It's a thing you got to kind of live, I guess. All right. Well,
yeah.
No, go ahead. What were you saying?
I mean, I personally, like my own personal beliefs is that, the Bible is a book that to be interpreted and reinterpreted, and it's been passed down through so many generations and interpreted so many different times that you can't take everything at a base level, and you have to look deeper into the meanings of every single word that's used. That's something I learned in college just through Bible interpretation. And I think that there are a lot of people that aren't willing to put in that study, or if they do, they only put in the study that will help to back up whatever their opinion is. And they're not willing to accept the fact that maybe there's more than one way to look at something. So.
Gotcha. All right. Well, one more tough question, and then we'll have a fun one or two, and then we'll let you go and let you've got somewhere to be. So if I may, I had a couple other questions. I think you've kind of already answered those, so there's no need to ask those again. But if I may borrow the language that you used, I assume you wrote the headline. I don't know if HuffPo picks those or if you got to. But what do you think made you feel so, to quote you, broken? The years of having to stay in the closet, or the fallout after you were outed?
The fallout was both very reaffirming and very devastating at the same time, if that makes any sense. Because it was reaffirming in the sense that I discovered all of these people that I didn't even realize I had before then. And so I got so much love from so many places that I wasn't even expecting, that it was very reaffirming and very it made me know that I was on the right path. But at the same time, a couple of the cornerstones of my life were no longer 100% supportive of my life. And I have been, for the majority of my life, kind of the chosen child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who got straight A's and perfect attendance and did everything right. And so to go from being the perfect one to the one who was a disappointment kind of took away that base that I had known, and took away that automatic reassurance that I had that I was this great kid. And I didn't feel as if I had someone who I could call to bail me out if I needed bailing out of some situation, like if I suddenly wasn't able to pay rent, or if something like that happened. I knew that I was really, really on my own for the first time in my life. And I don't want to say anything that's like insensitive to anybody involved, so I don't want to go too much deeper into that. But
Sure.
suffice to say, I felt as if I didn't have the support that I had before, and it just made me feel, when I was going to bed at night, I had this very empty feeling as a result. And so, you go to the role model to know that things are going to be okay, and then life works a way for you actually to meet this person and for them to be everything that you wanted them to be. And it brought this real inner peace that I don't know. Since that happened, it's just amazing. I felt some relief in being able to let that weight off my shoulders when I finally did come out, but the real relief came in that moment. And for whatever reason, since then, I haven't been afraid. It was like life was working something for me.
Right on, right on. Yeah, well, regardless of where people come down on the issue, I think one thing we can all, if we're honest, acknowledge is that most of us will never have to know what it's like to go through what you go through, and I think, for that, if nothing else, we should all respect the hell out of you. So there's the tough questions. The fun question I have, and I should have given this bit of background before the interview started. Mr. Collins is actually BFFs with TYT host Ben Makowitz because Rance got his start in show business at Turner Classic Movies.
Oh my gosh. I hope you guys can see computer screens on here, because I took a picture with them the other day. Seriously.
Do a screen share. We can totally see it.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to pull this up.
All right, so while you're pulling up that screen share, which is, by the way, on the Google Hangouts up on your left hand, it's the green screen with an arrow on it. While you're pulling that up, the question I have for you is, how much of a little girly man is Ben Makowitz?
Well, I have to be completely honest. I don't really know Ben too well. I met Ben Makowitz because I was an intern at Turner Classic Movies, where, of course, he is the second-in-command host on the channel. And
Ben. Second.
There's Robert Osborne, and then there's Ben Makowitz. You can see my hand. It's down here. But I don't think he's remembered me any of the times we've met, because we've met like several different occasions. And twice now I've gotten pictures taken with him. And my friend and I have gone to the Turner Classic Movie Film Festival the last couple of years. And we've had our picture taken with him both times. And both times we've had a long conversation about where we live in Los Angeles. So he's obviously not paying attention. Of course, when you go to the TCM Film Festival, that's kind of like where he's a rock star, and all of the 80-year-old women who are there think he's the hottest thing ever. So, regardless to say, I did get a picture taken with Ben at the TCM Film Festival, and I am trying to find that picture right now.
That is glorious. This interview just went from great to perfect.
I mean,
Sean, Becca, do you guys have any questions for?
Yeah, I was going to say, you should print the picture of you and Ben Mankiewicz on your shirt, and then introduce yourself to him again for like the 5th time.
And be like, Ben, we've met many times. Why do you not remember this? It's not that I think he's insensitive. You have to understand.
No, he's insensitive. He's a horrible person.
While he may be a horrible person, you have to understand at TCM, he has a lot of responsibilities. He has to, every time that Robert Osborne isn't available, he has to talk. I mean, only when Robert's not available. That's the only time they want him. But you understand, it's a tough life. It's a tough life, I'm sure.
We've had a running challenge for Ben to come on the show ever since Bruce Springsteen declared that I was a better person than he was, and Ben has not answered the challenge. So
That's awful.
yeah, he's an awful person.
Gosh, maybe I can find. There's one from last year as well. Maybe I can find that one. I guess I'll have to go to Facebook now. Goodness, this is such an epic moment. Do you have another fun question while I'm searching for this?
I think that was really all I had. Becca, Sean, do you have anything else?
If that's to know.
I can't tell if Becca's thinking or.
That's the thing I do sometimes, unexpectedly. I'm curious about, though I don't feel like it's very on topic, but I'm still curious, what the move was like for you. Like, if that was liberating to be moving from not only a fairly conservative area, but an area where even in the big cities, everybody knows everybody, right? That is, you can't go do stuff and be like, oh, well, this is never going to get back to anybody. So is it liberating, or did it make you feel more like there was a divide between how you were living and what you were sharing with some of the people who were close to you?
Well, you know, at first I very carefully monitored all of my Facebook privacy settings, you know, and for the first little while I made sure I didn't add anybody on Facebook who I met here for fear that something would get back. But I got looser and looser as things got on. I guess eventually it was at a point where I was like, well, eventually this is going to have to come out in one way or another. And so I maybe kind of unconsciously let a little bit of guard down and showed more and more of myself. But I did definitely worry a lot about what might get back to my parents. Of course, the biggest thing that happened about a year ago, I started writing a web series with some friends of mine, and the web series premieres on June 9th. It's movienightseries.com. It's called Movie Night. Anyway, I am one of 6 main characters in it, and we wrote my character as a gay man who is not out to his family. Which,
oh, wow. That's so meta.
Which was very on point at the time that we wrote everything. And then while we were filming is when everything came out. But we did like a whole Kickstarter campaign and everything, and I kept all of that hidden away from my friends and family back home, and just for fear of something getting back to them. So that was like the pinnacle of my fear. But at that point, you know, I knew, like, well, by the time this show premieres, then something's going to have to come out at some point. But I definitely, for the first year or so, I mean, like, I had my first relationship and kept it all hidden away and didn't upload selfies of us eating yogurt anywhere. You know, it was an interesting. It's not a healthy way to live. It's not a healthy way to live, and I don't recommend it.
That actually brings me to one of my questions, because as Jordan knows, I am a notorious bad poster of bad things that I shouldn't post on Facebook. Not saying that your lifestyle is bad or anything, but I actually have gotten in trouble for it. But it's kind of freeing to be able to post whatever you want and not worry about the consequences. Do you feel that way now, that you are more like liberated in that way, that you don't have to like monitor your privacy settings of this photo and all that? And my follow-up to that is, did you ever think about making 2 Facebook pages?
I did think about that. I didn't, but I did consider doing that at some point. And then just making it to where I could only add certain people. But ultimately, I didn't do that. What I did do is I created a list of people who could see stuff and people who couldn't see stuff. And then I made sure that I reviewed everything that got posted on my Facebook and all the pictures that I was tagged in. But it was really great after coming out. This is probably the first real feeling of liberation I had after coming out. Was not long after I came out. It was Halloween, and I did a Halloween thing here in West Hollywood. Which West Hollywood, for those who do not know, WeHo is the center of all things gay in Southern California, and they have a big festival that all sorts of people come to, a few 100,000 every year, and I went as Peter Pan, showing lots of chest, tights, and I was with a few drag queens who were dressed as Mary Poppins and Cruella de Vil, among others. And so that was definitely not something I would have allowed myself to be tagged in before October, but I don't have to worry about that anymore. And I definitely am a fan of hashtagging on Instagram. Hashtags are how you get followers, and I am not afraid to hashtag a picture Instagay.
Wow. Well, there you go. Well, I don't know that we can go out on a better note than that.
Wait, I got a final question.
Hold on, Sean. Let me throw the camera over to Rance right quick here, just a sec.
Rance, say something.
Hello. This is Ben Makowitz and Rance Collins, and my friend Oriana over there. So this is the important part.
I would just like to point out that Rance, sorry to put you on blast here, Rance is not a particularly tall dude, and
no, I'm not.
Just want to show that Ben
towering over Ben.
Yeah.
I actually was bending down a little bit. That way he wouldn't, I was walking on my knees.
All right.
This is my final question. All right. It starts with a long setup. All right. So the founding fathers hated living under a king, but they owned slaves. The abolitionists didn't want women to have rights. The women's suffrage movement was kind of racist. Martin Luther King was anti-gay. Are you, as a gay rights activist, now going to be against the next group, which I believe will be robots, having our rights?
Rance, you don't have to answer that.
Well, I mean, like, if the robots are played by Haley Joel Osment, like in AI, then of course I'm going to be against them because we saw what he grew up to be. But but if they grow up to be Jude Law in the same movie, then I'm fine. It's just a matter. I just have to see what they're going to look like,
So what you're saying is it's okay to judge robots on their looks.
Yes.
All right. Well, with that, we've got to move on. Rance, feel free to stick around for the panel. I know you've got somewhere to be, so it's totally up to you if you want to hang around for a while. For our next story, we're gonna we're gonna go from someone who left Arkansas to go to California and come back to Arkansas, where rather germane to the conversation, gay marriage for the last week has been legal, at least in certain counties, sort of. So what I want to do is just give it's really convoluted and really complicated, and Becca will be able to clear some of this up for us because she's out there on the front lines. But I want to give a real quick play-by-play just rundown of the gay marriage in Arkansas timeline. So in 2004, by a 3-to-1 margin, Arkansas voted to ban gay marriage and to make that a constitutional amendment. May 9th, last Friday, County Circuit Judge Chris Piazza ruled that ban unconstitutional. Now, his ruling did not specifically strike down a state law which placed prohibitions on county clerks from issuing same-sex marriages, and so roughly 5 counties began issuing licenses. On Monday, May 12th, so Monday of this week, former Governor Mike Huckabee called for Piazza to be impeached, and there's outrage and backlash. By Wednesday, May 14th, 1 day ago, 456 gay couples in Arkansas had received permission to marry, but only Washington and Pulaski counties were still issuing licenses due to the possible discrepancy in Piazza's ruling. The Arkansas Supreme State Court refused to issue a stay on the ruling, and today Piazza corrected what he called a clerical error and also struck down the ban on clerks issuing licenses. So as of today, the floodgates are open. At least some of these counties are going to start issuing the certificates again. Although there may be a timeline on that. We'll let Becca get into that. She knows more than we do. So starting tomorrow, the licenses should be expected to resume. the one of the little twists here is that the state attorney general, the person who is charged to represent the state and the laws on the books and fight this, is pro-gay marriage personally, but because of the duties of his office, has started an appeal to the decision. So he's got that's Attorney General Dustin McDaniel. So there's a lot of there's crazy stuff going on. I'm going to go ahead. This won't be nearly as structured of an interview, if you can call Rance's interview structured. So much as it is just a general kind of, hey, Becca, what's going on? You're out there on the front lines. What does this look like?
Mostly right now.
Start off by telling us, like, who you are, what you're with, who you're with, and kind of what you do. I should have really given a better backstory there. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Absolutely. So basically, when this went through Friday at 5 o'clock, Eureka Springs in Carroll County, which was actually not one of the 6 counties named in the lawsuit, but it's Eureka Springs that has a pretty liberal history. They made the decision to go ahead and start issuing marriage licenses that Saturday. If you were following the news, there was a lot of stuff about clerks not coming in and another clerk having to come in to issue licenses, a lot of anxiety, people being turned away, mixed-sex couples being given preference over same-sex couples when they first got there. But ultimately, they went ahead and started issuing licenses, and the woman who performed the first same-sex union in Arkansas began being referred to in media as the woman in the rainbow dress. A woman in a rainbow dress officiated the ceremony. Marriages were officiated by the woman in the rainbow dress. From that, come Monday morning, she and her good friend, and then just some of us in the community, they showed up at Washington County Courthouse. I was frantically Facebooking them saying, what can I do, how can I help? And honestly, Monday, everybody thought we'd be shut down again. We assumed there'd be an emergency stay put in, we'd be shut down. So at 1 o'clock, I finally get a message that says, well, we've run out of coffee. And from there, and with all of the officiants that we were keeping on call to make sure there were people there to get people married, with trying to hand out flowers, trying to make sure that people had some kind of a wedding, their wedding day, Team Rainbow Dress was formed. And since then, it started out as a hashtag just to help people find pictures of their wedding day and information about what was going on. It since has turned into a Facebook page. Laura and Michelle, the 2 women who sort of head Team Rainbow Dress, are both members of the Northwest Arkansas Center for Equality, who run Pride Month, which is starting in June, which is just great timing for us. They are just a really important center for the community in Northwest Arkansas. So they're affiliated with the Northwest Arkansas Center for Equality. I refer to myself as sort of just a mercenary volunteer, like I'm out for hire, metaphorically, of course. So I've just been up there, we've all been up there trying to, one, make sure that people have an officiant there to get them married. Because, of course, a lot of these couples didn't think this was going to be a possibility. And I think even for couples who have gone about marriage the traditional route, like, you don't really know how the whole marriage license thing works until you're there going through it. So making sure there's someone there to sign it so that they can get it filed. And then also just doing things like having pastries and coffee. We've had a lot of couples who said they left X City at 2 in the morning to try to get there first thing in the morning. Flowers and then pictures. People come and they have no way to get pictures of their own wedding day. So that's been our mission here in Fayetteville.
Awesome. So I know part of this, and this is equally as convoluted as well. We're not going to get into all of it, but birth certificates are now, like, a lot of parents of gay couples have been able to get both partners' name on the children's birth certificate. Is that something that you help do, or is that something that takes place somewhere else?
No, we are not, partly just because of the sort of slapdash nature of it, right? We aren't equipped to deal with a lot of the legal side of it. What we are pushing couples to do, particularly if they're out of state, is get straight to the Social Security office just as soon as they leave. Because when we have a day like today, where things are suspended for a whole day, it doesn't only affect what's going on at the Washington County Courthouse, it affects how other people think they're supposed to be doing their jobs. So theoretically, once you get things going on a federal level, it does make things easier, but we know particularly a lot of our couples from out of state are going home to some really big challenges. We try to connect them with resources that might be able to answer some of those legal questions, but we're there more to just facilitate this day and try to make it, well, it's going to be memorable, but try to make it something that you didn't have to run and go do.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the other big news that's come out of this is the University of Arkansas system, including the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences, which is a big hospital in Little Rock. It employs a ton of people. They're now allowing, as a result of this, they're allowing gay spouses to be listed on insurance plans. So a lot of the basic human rights that we kind of got into this with in the interview with Rance. Like, regardless of where you come down, whether it's for religious beliefs or cultural beliefs, about what you think about gay people doing what gay people do. What you absolutely can't be against is them like getting the same tax breaks and the people they love not dying because they couldn't get insurance, stuff like that. So the things that I feel really are the role of the state, the basic human rights. The doors are finally opening, even in places like Arkansas that are not traditionally seen as bastions of civil rights for gay people. So there's a lot of really encouraging news. However, not to throw a cold rag on that, you have some possible insight here because of your proximity to this, that the tide or the era of good feelings might be over here in a few days. Is that true?
Our concern isn't so much that things might. So a further motion for stay has already been filed, but the plaintiffs have been given, so us, our side, has been given until noon Monday. And that's actually, as frustrating as it's to have to do this dance, the fact that we're doing it at all today in Arkansas is amazing. And a lot of the conversations that we've had, in and amongst our team, and then also with the couples coming in. And if you told me last week this is where I was going to be, I would have said you were crazy. So although it is true that there's still the potential for restrictions to go into place next week, tomorrow we're acting as though we are working against the potential of an emergency stay. That's just our protocol, because we want people to get these rights, exactly like you're talking about.
Just kind of a sense of urgency in general.
Yes, and that's one of the things that's been a little frustrating but still important is people who they have a friend that they want to do the ceremony, or they've got a wedding day planned, having to tell these people, you're right, you should have 60 days, but you don't. We need to get you filed right now and do the ceremony, do the big important emotional stuff exactly the way you want to have your big day, but let's get the stuff that the state requires done now. So that's been unfortunate but necessary. However, what we're optimistic about is this. By giving us the rest of the day tomorrow, and by giving us through, theoretically, if an emergency stay is issued, we should have until at least noon Monday before any more decisions come down the line. And that's barring all sorts of other legalese that could happen. But that's what we're hoping for. And as you pointed out, we already have over 400 marriage licenses filed, not just issued, but already filed on the books, same-sex unions in Arkansas. So it's just sort of moving from there. Once those are established, it becomes so much harder to move backwards. And that's what we're really excited about. It may be slow progress forward from here. It may be progress like the last 24 hours that has been a complete emotional roller coaster for all of us. But it's very, very hard to go backwards on this path too far.
Gotcha. One last question, then I hesitate to let Sean ask questions, but one more question, and we'll let Sean ask one. Um, a lot of times, like, you don't, if you don't put a human face on this, it's so easy to get caught up in the politics of it and everything like that. So is there one particular story, I mean, one couple, one person, whatever, something that with you being there, facilitating this and making it happen, like one story that you want to share with the world, like what's that story?
Unfortunately, the stories that I most want to share with the world are, perhaps out of my own frustrations, are the people who are having to hide their own wedding days, the people who can't be on our page, the people who can't tell anyone, the people who are paranoid about me even taking pictures on their own cell phones.
Wow.
Just the complications of it. But that said, one of the reasons, and by the way, I encourage anybody who's following this to check out the Facebook page Team Rainbow Dress, because we've got so many pictures of so many happy couples. One of Michelle's really good focuses have been, let's get couples kissing. Let's stop letting people act like this is different or abnormal. We want to see these couples kissing on their wedding day like you would want any couple to kiss. We've had some really cute couples coming from across state lines. Probably the one instance that has really sealed a lot of how I think about this was the woman who came out and said through her tears, it doesn't say civil union, it doesn't say domestic partnership, we have a marriage license, and then broke down crying again. And that was the moment that I wish everybody who says, well, they should be happy with this, could have seen.
Awesome. All right. Well, Sean, please don't sabotage the show after that wonderful story. What question do you have? One question, then we've got to move on.
I'm not going to sabotage the show. In the Proposition 8 case, they ruled on an issue of standing, right? So basically, they just ruled that the group that was suing to get Proposition 8 reinstated, that they had no legal grounds to sue. So basically, the court punted and didn't give them a national right to marriage. If this Arkansas case goes to the court, like, how do you feel about being a part of a case or being a part of like a movement in your state that could potentially lead to a national right to marriage? Because they can't punt on it. There's no standing issue.
That would be ideal, essentially. I also think, even if the court case doesn't get pushed in that direction, I think that this state this state following the path of progress would be a big cue to other states if they can't hold it off any longer. But I mean, part of all of our excitement this week has been being part of history in addition to being there for all these individual people. I think even actually in the day-to-day, it's really easy to lose sight of the fact that this could be part of history, because there's so many wonderful people coming in and you're hearing their stories and you're focused on trying to make sure everything goes smoothly for them. But for Arkansas, of all the states, to be the state that sort of set off that domino would be, it wouldn't quite make up for Little Rock 60 years ago, 50 years ago, but it would come close.
And of course, Becca, they're referencing the Little Rock 9. People don't realize that you've got kind of Virginia on the east and Arkansas on the west are kind of these gateway southern states where if change comes, it comes in through one of those two gates. Whether it's Arkansas with the private option or gay marriage, Arkansas really has the potential to be the game-changing state that gets things going in the South, and that's something. The Little Rock 9 kind of being a big exception to that rule. Hopefully, we can be a force for good. Thank you so much for that, Becca. You are welcome to stick around. We do need to move on.
I have more questions.
All right, go ahead, Sean.
You were talking earlier about how people are afraid to post their pictures of themselves, like associated with your like groups in any way. This is one thing that I love the court case decision. I love Piazza's decision and all that. but do you feel that the courts overturning a law like this creates a bigger backlash because you get all that people ginned up about judicial activism than if it was a legislative move? Like, do you feel like that makes the backlash worse? That's my question.
I am sort of two minds about that. I certainly agree that having any sort of judiciary overturning, like anything that says we're going to overturn this thing that the people said, even if it's a decade ago, does, yes, lead to more backlash in some ways. On the other hand, I think this was a decision that was always going to have backlash. We've certainly seen that in states that are traditionally held to be much more liberal than Arkansas. And that's why we have a balanced system. Is so when there's an area of disagreement about this, where the majority of people are benefiting from it, LGBT identities just don't make up the majority population of Arkansas. But that somebody has to be there to say that doesn't mean you can take their rights away just because there are more of you. That is that branch of government's purpose.
Yeah, and I think the fact that this was a constitutional amendment, it kind of almost had to be a court decision because it's really, really hard for a legislature to overturn a constitutional amendment like that. So yeah, Sean, do you have anything else? Or are we ready to move on and let you drive for a little bit on the New York story?
I'm good.
All right. Well, now Sean is going to tell us, since we're talking about Arkansas coming into the 21st century, Sean is going to tell us how New York has finally come into the 21st century and condoms are no longer illegal on the streets. I'll let you take it from here, Sean.
All right, so I have to make a correction for it's not particularly condoms in general, but the NYPD over the Bloomberg administration and the Giuliani administration, like a lot of big cities, have this practice of arresting people under the suspicion of prostitution based on their possession of condoms. Now, they confiscate the condoms, and regardless of whether the case goes to trial, they don't return them to the alleged hookers or even actual hookers. Now, this might seem like it makes sense. Like when I first heard it, it makes sense. A prostitute's going to have condoms. You want to collect evidence. It all seems to make sense. But as a public safety issue, what turned out to be the unintended consequence of this practice was that prostitutes would stop carrying condoms and stop having safe sex. So recently, William Bratton, the new police chief under de Blasio, has decided to end this practice. And one of the things that he cited, besides what I just said about the STD spread, for the reasons he was going to end it, was the fact that the New York's government spends $1 million plus every year to give out free condoms, and the NYPD is basically confiscating them off the street and destroying them. So I think this is a positive move, and I want to get I think it's a half measure too, because I think Jordan might agree with me on what the actual solution to this problem is. But I just wanted to know what you guys think about the NYPD changing this policy.
Yeah, well, it's funny you brought up the reasoning in it. Okay, well, we'll throw out the obvious. It's the most sensical policy change in the history of policy changes. Like, you can't. I mean, unless it's to catch a predator, where you're going to a house where you've been set up or whatever, like, condoms are not proof of like illicit sexual acts or whatever. Like, I mean, if you're gonna make condoms proof of prostitution, then you're gonna have to arrest every 16 to 18-year-old boy who's had that same condom in his wallet for the past 3 years. But the other thing here is I mean, it's borderline entrapment. Like, if the city is spending, how much, say, $1 million a year to give them out, and then you're going to go turn around and bust people for having them, like, that's entrapment, man. That's not fair. That's a setup. That's not right.
And to your point about the young kids for predators, condoms are still admissible in cases where a predator goes to meet a child and he has them. So they did leave that part in there that you can use them as evidence like that. But one of the funny things I read in the article, and it's not ha-ha funny, it's more that's terrible funny, is that the number of condoms that the police would claim was the amount that would indicate prostitution was 8. Now, if for those of you who don't know, if you get condoms from New York City for free, you can get up to 10. So if you take all of them and you walk out of the street, there's a good chance that you get arrested and they're confiscated by the same government. Which is ridiculous.
Wow. 8. So there was, remember that, like 7 condoms, you're just a safe person. 8 condoms, you're a prostitute. Man, bureaucracy.
But Rebecca, do you want to jump in on this, or?
You know, I'm trying to decide what I think about 8 being the dividing number. Like, this is really the detail that's got my attention.
Well, that's what some officers claim and some prostitutes claim, that it was around 8 was the general number. Sometimes it could be 3. A lot of times this lends itself to just profiling people you think are hookers, and you just stop them and you arrest them based on that. But what do you think about the overall aspect of you're making hookers less safe, or like we're not having safe? They're not having like you're not ending prostitution, but you're.
Oh no, don't end prostitution. Just make it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Becca. Yeah, it's another example of like of the self-defeating philosophy that is prohibition in any way. Like, so what you do is say, oh, these the sex trade, the sex industry is a horrible industry. I mean, like, let's keep it real. Like, sex slavery right now is a huge problem, not only in America but in the world. And you can even argue that there's more slaves now than at any point in history because of how just critical this sex slavery is. But one reason why is because there's more and more, like, the laws are passed and prohibitions are placed that make the sex trade, like, is the only way it can operate is to be as dirty and as evil as it can possibly be. And this is an example of taking that to the extreme. So not only are you not going to have legal, brothels, whatever word you want to use, where it can be monitored and regulated, but even the girls who are out there doing it illegally can't even have, like, the most just, like, basic modicum of sexual protection and safety. They can't even carry condoms to stop STDs because it's going to indict them and then they're going to go to prison for it. Like, it's just stupid all the way around.
Right, and the reason I said that this was a half measure, in my opinion, is because I think prostitution in general should just be legalized. Like, the STD transmission rate in the counties in Nevada where prostitution is legal, and it's legal in brothels over there, is the lowest of any group in the United States. Like, it's amazing, like, how low it is. And that's because it's legal. The police can come in to the brothels. Like, it's like the safest you could possibly have prostitution be. And I don't understand. Like what they're doing is, if some guy cheats on his wife, he goes sees a hooker, he gets an STD, he brings it back because they didn't have condoms. Like, it's crazy. I don't know what the NYPD was thinking. 10 years of this, by the way, at least.
And that's not to absolve the guy that goes and does that to his wife. Like, obviously he's a horrible person, but the purpose of legislation should not be to make people better people. The purpose of legislation is to exist for the good of the community. And so whether or not you agree with something morally or not, you have to look at what's going to create a safer environment, what's going to create a better society. And the data is there. We know that laws like this, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, whether it's prostitution, that these prohibition laws just create more danger, more everything that they supposedly exist to stop. They just exacerbate the problem. It's one more example of that. Becca, do you want to chime in before we move on?
Well, I mean, it really occurred to me that everything I was going to say was essentially just agreement. I mean, I certainly see the problems of exploitation because realistically, the porn industry, which is legal, it's still an incredibly exploitative industry, but there's still a significant difference there. And I don't, as you point out, the only reason to make prostitution illegal is by making law always a moral issue. And even then, it's kind of a shady moral issue. Because if you're talking about 2 single people, who cares if money changes hands? And yet, almost nationwide, we've turned it into this, no, this is necessarily and inherently bad. And then going to, as you point out, just really stupid further measures to try to stamp out something instead of looking at how you could make it safer for everyone, better for everyone. And probably get rid of a lot of the most exploitative aspects of it as well, because if it's under control, then it can be regulated. And you can have all the condoms.
You can have all the condoms, all of them.
Millions of them. No, I totally agree with Becca, and to her point, if you have it legal in brothels, chances are the women on the street are underage or people who are forced into the trade. So if you have a legal industry, it's easier to distinguish between what we really want to stop. And that's like my closing point.
Totally, totally. All right, so moving on to our next story. We're going to move on to driving on sunshine, solar roads. We all know that here in America, we've, whether or not, I say we all know, I'm sure Sean's going to shake his head. We've got a problem with the way we get energy in the United States of America. And we also know our infrastructure is a far cry from where it was in its glory days. Now, Scott and Julie Brusaw, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, may have found a way to kill or save two birds with one stone. Their answer is the Solar Roadways Project, which is solar panels that are designed to withstand the heaviest trucks and replace our current asphalt and concrete roads. They're textured for grip and water runoff. They've got the potential for heating elements to be built into them to melt ice and snow, which not only does that make the roadways safer and flow better, but there's also another environmental impact there because we have huge issues with the amount of sodium that gets into a lot of our fresh water sources and streams and rivers and whatnot. And I know here in Arkansas, even actually up around, well, I don't want to, I'm sorry, I shouldn't give away where Becca lives, but in Arkansas, in certain parts of the state, there have been some experiments run where they use beet juice instead of salt to try to, find a more environmentally stable alternative to just throwing tons of salt out into ecosystems where it doesn't belong. Anyway, so these roads could provide an answer just by being electrically heated, and they could also be lit by LED lights instead of having yellow painted lines and whatnot, so they'd be a little safer at night. Now, this is not just some kind of pie-in-the-sky drawing board concept either. They are, thanks in large part to 2 phases of funding from the U.S. Federal Highway Administration, so I know they've already lost Sean. They've already built a parking lot with the main basic features. That is the ability to withstand weight, although I don't know that they've quite tested it with like big rigs and tractor trailers, but to withstand weight and to gather energy. So they've got a working model in place, which it's still a far cry from a road. Now this estimate is from the couple. This is from the Brusaws, so keep that in mind. But before you sound like a jackass in the comments, go check the data for yourself, which you can do at solarroadways.com. They claim that if these roads are implemented nationwide, they have the ability to cut U.S. greenhouse gas production by 75%. They also contend that these roads would pay for themselves due to the energy production, being able to turn around and sell that. There seems to be at least one government player who believes what they're selling, and that is their hometown of Sandpoint, Idaho, might end up being their first customer. Now, if you would like to be a part of making history yourself, they also have an Indiegogo campaign. They're trying to raise $1 million. They're just upwards of 100,000 right now, so definitely check that out. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to Sean. So what do you think, man? Solar roads, is this the path of the future?
So I actually really like this idea, with 2 caveats that I'll throw in later. I really like it because, the interstate system has not been innovated upon since it started, right? Which is, there's just been asphalt roads. Texas, they got big arches, and that's kind of cool, but there's been no, real innovation on them. So I would be very interested in this, and I like the fact that they have one town that wants to go for this, and I'd love for that to be the beta test, because, if the federal government mandates these at some point, there's no way that they're going to stop doing them, even if they turn out to not work or be cost effective or whatever. So I want to see how it works in a town. I want to see what the energy you get, because the thing that's about these is even if they cost technically a little more than the asphalt roads, if they do produce energy, that could offset that cost. So I want to see how it works over a certain period of time. And if the town is going to pay for it or this Indiegogo campaign is going to pay for it, then I like to see how it works. I'm not anti-innovation, Jordan. So your offhanded comments in the middle of that, I was offended by it.
Well, my offhanded comments were the fact that this was being funded by the feds. Now, but you bring a great point. I would want to push back a little bit. I like your idea in theory because, like actual liberals, I'm not for stupid government spending. I'm for lots of government spending when it makes sense and none when it doesn't. But so is their hometown in Idaho? I mean, I'm not. I don't claim to be a climatologist by any means. But you're saying you want to see this on a local level. I feel like, you know, for wanting to see if this is going to be effective, like where's the best place to do it? Like what local municipality? Because obviously, if you do it out in the desert, it's going to get a ton more, you know, than the average American town. You do it up in Seattle, it's going to get a ton less.
I'm just saying I want to see it somewhere on the ground, like not even about the energy, in the ground. I want to see cars go over it. I want to see what happens when it snows. Like I want to see that in a small sample before we start building these roads. And what really kind of scares me about it is that they throw out an estimate, and an estimate is a code word whenever you get a government contract that you're going to blow 3 times the amount of money. So I'd like to see a budget and a beta test. Like even if they don't capture the energy that they want, if they're cost neutral or probably cheaper than our asphalt roads, or even if they're a little bit more, like I just want to see that they work and they don't crack or something ridiculous doesn't happen when they're being built.
Yeah, that to me, that's the litmus test. Like these things, like not only do they not have to make money, they don't even have to be cost, you know, revenue neutral. Like if they cost less, if they're able to make back, just recoup enough of their price to cost less than asphalt, then obviously that's the better decision. On top of all the, just from a strictly money standpoint, environmental, you know, pros be damned. If they cost less, then you got to go with it. I guess the one thing I'm scared of, the articles I've read on this, they do say it'll withstand the heaviest trucks. Becca can probably attest to this. I know you don't really see it in New York, but like in Arkansas, people drive tractors down the road. Like there's a county road between my home, like where I'm from, and Little Rock, that literally has to be repaved twice a year because it's a farm road and it's completely destroyed by the end of each particular growing season, and they've got to repave the whole thing. And if you go down it in one of its bad times, it will destroy your car. That's, you know, there are heavier, more dangerous things to roads out there than 18-wheelers. So that would be kind of what my one holdup. But hey, if they prove that it can take, you know, these tractors and combines and some of these, you know, more rural parts of the country, I don't know, it seems like a win-win to me.
My question, like what I'm interested to see if they've tested is how easily they patch, and obviously I'd have to go look at this and find this out. And then also just the like the things that get on roads that I find don't always get tested in civil engineering, like crashes and sudden like downpours of liquid out of trucks, not just water out of the sky. Roadkill, like it seems to me that asphalt is, you know, sort of low investment, like, oh, we go throw out a patch on it. But have they already done work on patching them?
That is an excellent question. Unfortunately, it's one that I can't answer. So you know, that would be a great thing to look up.
That's why we got to beta test it and not just start doing it nationwide. Like it's those little things, because you don't know. There's cigarette butts. There's like all these different things that people throw out of their car, garbage, like all these crazy things. So I just want to see. I want to know if these solar panels are also flammable, because the last thing I want to do is see a pile up that also catches the road on fire. So I want to see stuff like that, and that's why I want to beta test it. And I sanction the people in this town of Idaho to enjoy the benefits and pay for the consequences if it goes horribly wrong. I'm willing to do that for them.
I bet they're so relieved.
Oh, okay. We're done with that story. There's nothing we can say better than that.
Oh, wait. There's one more thing. If this does work, it will solve the big problem with solar panels, and that's real estate. It's just they take up too much space. So that would be a great thing if this worked.
Well, and I do have, okay, well, since we've opened the door for actual discussion again here, is not that this tops Becca. I know one of the big holdups is, it's kind of one of these things where, like, vested interest against alternative energy point out something that is, a genuine con about alternative energy, but compared to the cons of the status quo, it's nothing. That is to say, because we're human beings, like, everything we do does have an effect on the environment, and therefore, since we can't find a perfect solution, we should stick with the worst one we've got. And with a real problem with solar energy and stuff like that, and electric-powered stuff, is the batteries have a lot of heavy metals in them. So with this being like so widespread and at soil level, like how the composition of the panels and the battery and the infrastructure, like. I guess my question would be: does this, is there a possibility this opens up heavy metal, pollution into other ecosystems? Stuff like that. I would want to, kind of be reassured of. But it really seems like, I don't want to say silver bullet because then, that seems just unrealistic. But man, this seems like such a great solution, and it answers so many of the objections, and it's something we need. Like, it's not extra. We're not having to put up wind farms or solar farms. Like, we need roads. So let's go ahead and turn that real estate that we already have set aside. Let's make it do two things. And oh man, that's fantastic. So moving on to our last story for the evening, we've got that segregation in our nation's public schools is returning, but probably not where you think. According to a report published by the Civil Rights Project at UCLA. School segregation may be a rising problem in the U.S. It's still not at the levels that it was, pre-1954 Brown versus Board of Education, but it is on the rise. 23% of African American students went to schools that were majority white, and that's the lowest number since 1968. New York, Michigan, Maryland, and Illinois are kind of the four really big offenders on this. More than 50% of black students attended schools where 90% of the school is the minority, are minority students. Obviously, 90% would not be the minority. And the same is true for Latino students in New York, California, and Texas. So with the exception of Texas, we've got some traditionally liberal states here really dropping the ball when it comes to racial representation in our public schools. There's a lot of reasons for this. Obviously, it's a big, complicated issue. America's a huge country with a complicated racial history. But housing segregation is probably the primary culprit, according to the author of the report, Gary Orfield. And I quote, neighborhood schools, when we go back to them as we have, produce middle-class schools for whites and Asians and segregated high-poverty schools for blacks and Latinos. That's just what the data bears out. That's not a statement of ideology. That's a reflection of the data. Other reasons include, of course, migrations of affluence, or commonly referred to as white flight, which leads to poor schools getting poorer, less trained teachers, and even the possibility of, if you want to take a free market approach, of less talented teachers, because obviously your good teachers, teachers, hey, they're great people, but they're still human beings. They want to go where the good employment opportunities are. And so most of them are probably going to try to go to better schools. And this is a huge problem we have in America, where we fund schools based on property taxes and stuff like that. So the more wealthy your neighborhood is, the more wealthy your school is, and it perpetuates that cycle. One thing that's really interesting in this study is how the schools, we kind of hinted at this earlier, fare regionally. The Northeast is more intensely segregated than before 1968. The Midwest, West, and border states are next on the list. They're less segregated than they were in the 60s, so they're not back above 68 levels, but they're more segregated now than they were in the 80s and 90s. And then Southern schools are the least segregated schools in the United States. Now, a lot of that, that's not necessarily a reflection of progressive policies in the South. It's a reflection of population. I know where I grew up in the Delta, when I was in elementary school, I was actually the minority, and it got closer to 50-50 as I got older and into high school. But that's that's just kind of what you have going on in the South. And also in the South, poverty is kind of a great equalizer, especially like in the Delta region of the South, where you've just got massive, massive poverty. And so what you've got are poor white folks and poor black folks, and the white folks can't afford to move out, and so there is a lot of integration across communities just because the things that other white people have done across the country, white folks in the Delta can't afford to do. But that's also why you have a lot of racial tension, because you don't have a clear minority. You've got a 50-50 split in the population, and there's ignorance across both segments of the population, and we know that where there's ignorance and lack of education and great intensity of need and poverty, you tend to have less than favorable outcomes amongst those communities. Now, in conclusion, the report states further research is needed to effectively analyze the problem across the U.S., and the authors pushed President Obama to take this situation seriously. Of course, so far the White House has offered no major encouragement nor incentives for working on integration. And of course, we can imagine what kind of field day the right wing would have if Mr. Obama did that. But you know what, Mr. Obama, it's your second term. Man up and take some shots. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Becca, let's start with you this time. You're I don't want to give away too much, but education hits close to home for you. So what do you have to say?
Actually, I will say this: it really doesn't surprise me to see Illinois on that list, and to see the South being less segregated, even as these old attitudes are maintained. I distinctly remember having a conversation with a friend from Illinois way back in undergrad, talking to the person who was at that time directing some of my studies in African American literature, and her saying, well, there aren't black characters in that book because there just aren't black characters in that area. Well, then I went to visit her in her hometown, and 30 minutes away there is a town that is black. And in all of my years in living in Oklahoma, I had never been in a white town and then a black town. That was completely foreign to my experiences. And so I think it's something that isn't talked about as much, and so it becomes easier to let it slide. It becomes a Southern problem. The South has a problem with race, the North doesn't. I think that in recent years that's gotten better. But I think that especially maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was very easy to say, well, it's the South that has the race problem, so they're the ones who need to be worried about it. That said, the South does still have a race problem. Not least because, as you point out, the people who perhaps have the best opportunity to be overcoming some of this don't always have the education to be understanding the flaws in these kinds of patterns of thought. So none of that surprises me, even as I find myself yet again sort of stumped as far as a solution goes. What do? Do you make small children miserable by busing them into districts where they feel unhappy and uncomfortable? Or do you say, well, we're going to try to force teachers into some other... Our education system has so many other complications right now that it's difficult to say where you even start with that specific question.
Yeah. And busing is a solution that's got so much baggage attached to it, and it's one of those things where I think it's undeniable at a point in time in American history that was what had to be done. As tough as it was and as unpleasant as it was, drastic steps had to be taken. So the question is, are we still there? And we may very well be. I don't know that we are. I don't feel qualified to say yes or no on that. I do think one thing that is an obvious solution is we've got to get away from this just stupid property tax model of funding public schools that we have now, because it so exacerbates the situation. And I think if we move to a model where poorer areas with poorer schools do not get inherently less funding, then you make the schools in those bad areas, even ever so slightly, you make them more attractive, or at least stop the hemorrhaging as opposed to them just running down, and then maybe this is me giving human beings way too much credit, but you don't have to bus people because the schools become organically a more attractive option. People are more okay with their kids going to places like that. That's obviously, again, to reference the phrase from the earlier story, that's not a silver bullet. Changing the tax model is not all of a sudden going to mean we've got great schools all the way across the board. but that is very clearly just a foundational, fundamental problem in the way we do. And I know we try to stem that, we try to patch it, with a Band-Aid with outside funding and other places like that. But the problem, if I could, not to get into a diatribe here, but like we've seen with the Voters' Rights Act being gutted, stuff like that. There's a push to because some of these institutional problems that were big in the South, why the things that the South caught flack for, rightly, they've gone away on an institutional level. A lot of those safeguards are now being stripped away legislatively, and I think schools are just another example of that. In Arkansas, there was I think it actually, gosh, I really should have done my research here. I know there was a debate. I'm pretty sure it got pulled away. Arkansas used to have a little fund set aside where money from wealthier districts, a certain percentage of it, ended up going to poorer districts. And if I'm not mistaken, that went away this year. I know at the very least it came really close. So if it didn't happen, that discussion is happening. And so that's like, one, that's an incomplete solution in the first place to say, oh, well, we'll take a little bit of extra money and throw it your way. We need a systemic change, but it not only because the Band-Aid approach doesn't work, but because the Band-Aid can be ripped off before the wound heals. So you've got to get down and actually fix the wound. Sean, what do you have to say for yourself? Why is your state so racist?
Yeah, so I will explain New York in a minute, but in New Jersey they actually have Supreme Court decisions, their state Supreme Court called Abbott cases that you guys should look into, where they equalize the poorer districts with the wealthier districts, so they all get the same amount of funding. It didn't improve any of the districts because the state money mostly got wasted. So like I always have like that issue. I don't think the public education problem is a funding issue. I think it's more of a mismanagement of or misallocation of resources and like those kind of problems. But to explain why,
let me cut you off. Let me cut you off because you're absolutely right. Which is why you should never point to New Jersey as an example to make a point. You're going to say it's not a point of funding, it's a point of misallocation. Then you don't point to Jersey, man.
Well, I'm saying
that's what they're known for, is sucking.
They systemically changed the way their schools were funded. It was a court decision. It's irreversible.
Yeah, but you got to reform Jersey before you can use Jersey as reform.
It's been over a decade for them trying it. I mean, it's not just Chris, but in New York, this totally makes sense because everybody is basically on the zip code system. You go to the school in your zip code. Now, I live in probably a very diverse zip code because I've always had a large number of Asian kids, a large number of Hispanic kids, a large number of white kids, all going to the same schools for like my life. Also, a large number of black kids. I don't know why I randomly left them out. But if I drive 15 minutes that way and go to the school that's to that zip code, then it's like an all-black school. If I drive, or a majority black school, if I drive that way, it's all Asian schools. So most of it is just like the zip code model, and it wouldn't take much effort in a place like New York where people are densely populated for you to solve this problem with busing. You wouldn't have to bus people for hours and hours. So it is doable locally over here, but like nobody really just seems to care. It's like it's New York, we're a liberal state, so everything must be fine or something. So like I think it's a mixture of we're not really, I guess we're not too concerned about integration of the schools anymore. And it's a little bit of self-segregating because a lot of people, when they come here, they move to, like, if you're Indian, you move to an Indian community. If you're Greek, you move to a Greek community. Like, so it's a lot of it is self-segregation. A lot of it is, like, I don't think it comes from, like, a place of evil, but I just think, like, a place of hatred. I think it comes from the zip code system, and we're just so, like, set on you have to go to the school near you because somebody decided that years and years and years ago. So I think it's more that than an actual racial problem.
Yeah, no, and that's totally true. Like human beings, we seek out people that, we're more like. I mean, hell, look at our panel here. We're Livy, McLiberson, and Sean, and we're all, kind of middle class white folks. Sean, I know you're not. Whatever, yeah, but and like it's just human nature. You go to people who are like you, and so like Sean said, that in and of itself is not necessarily evil. It does, however, open the door. It's really easy to manipulate that kind of more neutral habit we have, And Birmingham, Alabama is a great example of that. Like Birmingham is a city where instead of having like in Dallas, you got Dallas, and then you've got all the Metroplex. Or now it's Dallas Fort Worth, and it's all one city, and every city from here to here is Dallas now because it grew together. Birmingham is kind of the opposite. Birmingham doesn't have suburbs that Birmingham grew into. Birmingham has tiny cities within Birmingham that are based on literally like you live across the street and you're in a different city because they are the nicer districts that whenever Birmingham schools were segregated, pulled out of Birmingham so they could form their own school district. So you have all these tiny neighborhood cities in Birmingham, and it's just this bizarre setup. But to Sean's point, the zip code system is not inherently this evil school-wrecking thing, but it makes it really easy to kind of exploit some more innocuous tendencies of human nature and do that. But yeah, not to shift gears too much, but I do want to show this for anyone watching at home, and we'll get Jeff to splice this together whenever we put this online. Our master and commander, Jeff Waldorf, who is using his night off by watching the show and fact-checking us instead of spinning it with his wife like he should be, wanted to answer your question, Becca. On the FAQ on the Solar Roadways webpage, there's a question: how do you replace damaged panels in the highway? Since our system is modular, repair will be much quicker and easier than our current maintenance system for asphalt roads. We've learned in the U.S. over 160 billion is lost each year in productivity from people sitting in traffic due to road maintenance. Each of the panels contains their own microprocessor, which communicates wirelessly with surrounding panels. If one of them should become damaged and stop communicating, then the rest of the panels can report the problem. Each panel assembly weighs 110 pounds. A single operator could load a good panel into his or her truck, respond to the scene, replace the panel in a matter of minutes. So apparently these roads are super easy to fix. And they'll fix racism in our schools.
Then they're perfect. But seriously, thanks for the information. I know I told you this, but I have to head out because I have to be at the courthouse in far too short of a time. So thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for coming.
For the information off camera.
It's a pleasure.
You have a wonderful evening and fight the good fight tomorrow.
And give back Jordan's dog.
No, she is mine.
Well, with Becca's exit there, Sean, do you have anything else you wanted to contribute to the school story?
Yeah, it's just funny that the northeastern states, and I'm counting Chicago randomly in there because it's the second city, Illinois. It's one, these are the places with a lot of black people, but two, these are really places with a lot of just disparity in income and disparity in class. Like Manhattan people are like a completely different world from me, like here in Queens, and like I'm completely different from the Staten Island people. So like it makes sense that in places like this that you'll get this if you have a zip code based schooling system. But we could do a little better. Like busing isn't I wouldn't sign up for the hour-long bus ride because I think that hurts the kids longer because kids who take long bus rides do worse. But a little bit of effort here and there around the edges could make it more integrated. We are the melting pot in New York. That's what they call us, and it's like a travesty that our schools are like this. But I just don't think it comes from a place of evil.
Right. No, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think this is it opens the door for bad players, and so we do need to put safeguards in place. But at the same time, like expecting every school to be equal percentage across the country is a little unrealistic as well. And I don't know that anybody's asking for that, but we certainly we've got a problem now.
Right, and to tag team on the voting rights thing, a lot of people vote in their kids' elementary school around here, or their kids' junior high school, and it's pretty easy to know that that's the black school. And if you're trying to do voter ID or you're trying to make a longer line, you put less booths there. So like it does open the door. I don't think it starts out as an evil place, but it does open the door for shenanigans later on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think on that rather salient point, we'll go ahead and end the show because you're on a roll, and I don't want you to normally be your normal self. Thank you so much to our interviewees / panelists / guests / co-hosts tonight, and thank you so much to you, the audience. Thanks to Jeff Waldorf for letting me host tonight. This has been a wonderful opportunity. Join us next week. I don't believe we're doing a social justice hour tomorrow. Do you know that, Sean?
Tomorrow? No.
Yeah.
No,
No social justice hour. Okay, so join us next week. Whenever Jeff should be back, and we'll resume to things the way they normally are, and you guys won't have to listen to me talk near as much. Good night, and God bless everyone.